This playthrough is rated M for mature.
Greetings and salutations, viewers. Vauldemare back here with more Hakuōki stories of the Shinsengumi. In the last episode, the Shinsengumi had been forced to flee with the Shogun's army to another location, and our main character unfortunately got flung aside and left behind. There, she met Kazama, who had protected her from a group of potential rapists as well as killers. But now, being on the sidelines, she sees the true failure of the Shinsengumi and what will be their final result. Kazama has told us that the Satsuma and Chozu are now Imperial Army, and the Tokugawa's former forces and friendlies are now considered traitors. How will we deal with this? Is there anything we can do? Or are we just left to watch history unfold before us? Let's continue. I was at a loss for words. The heavy air, thick with the soot of the burning city and the sweat, blood, and anger of the two armies, pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. Kazama seemed to be waiting for me to speak, but I didn't know what to say. I asked the first question that came to mind. How will they do now that they have the Imperial Standard?
徳川幕府を潰して全てを取り上げる。目的は金だ。奴らは金で動く。相変わらず人間は愚かな生き物だ。
They'll crush the Tokugawa and take everything that belonged to the shogunate. All they want is money. That's all they ever wanted. Nothing has changed. Humans are still greedy, small-minded thieves. I hadn't expected him to so readily give up possibly secret information about the men he worked for. It bothered me that he called humans greedy and small-minded, though. So you're saying that all those people put their lives in danger for money? The anger in my voice didn't seem to faze him, if he even noticed it.
戦争は略奪の大義名分だ。その中身はただの権力と金の奪い合いだ。
War is just an excuse for large-scale theft. It's nothing but a scramble for money and power. I'm sure there are people like that, but not everyone's fighting just so they can get rich or powerful. Kazama raised an eyebrow.
そうか。上のやつだけのことじゃない。下のやつらも一緒だ。
Really? I'm not talking about the commanders and generals. The soldiers on the bottom are just the same.
下のやつらも楽に戦って生き残って褒美をもらうのが目的だ。
Those on the bottom look for easy fights so they can survive and be rewarded by their
お前
superiors.
を襲ったやつをもう忘れたのか。追いはぎ、戦場泥棒。あれが現実だ。
Have you already forgotten the men who attacked you? Bandits? Battlefield thieves? And that is the reality of war. No, I haven't forgotten about them. But there are some people who fight for the sake of other people, too. Kazama nodded.
言いたいのは新選組のことか。気持ちはわからなくもない。
You mean the Shinsengumi? I'll grant you that. What? Had he really just acknowledged that the Shinsengumi weren't the thieving bottom feeders he thought the rest of humanity would be? My eyes widened with surprise, but he continued.
だが負け組についた。ただそれだけだ。
Unfortunately, they were on the side that lost. Whatever motivated them is irrelevant now. Just as Kazama had predicted, the shogunate army began to retreat under the Yodo bombardment. He said that they were probably going to Osaka Castle and would retreat to Edo next, when Osaka fell. Even in Edo, they would lose, Kazama said. He seemed quite sure of it.
さて、俺はそろそろ行く。お前を連れて行くこともできるが。
I'll be leaving. I can take you, but... He stopped mid-sentence.
Kazama, その子から離れなさい。
Kazama, step away from her. I heard a familiar, dignified voice from behind me. San. She was glaring at Kazama furiously, and behind her, Amagiri.
確かにね。今日を抑えた者が勝者とはよく言うけれど。
While I grant that whoever controls Kyoto wins this engagement, I saw her eyes flick to the burning city, and a shadow of grief passed over her face.
だからって、あんたが好き勝手していいということはないよ。
That most certainly does not mean you are given leave to do as you please. Her tone brooked no dissent.
あんたがこの子を力ずくで奪っていくなら、私が日本中の鬼に命を下します。
If you choose to take her by force, then I'll put all of the demons of Japan on your scent. What? Kazama seemed unconcerned, but I was rather shocked. All the demons in the country seemed like overkill.
日本中の鬼が敵に回るけど、それでもいい？
You'll have to know where to hide. Your own people will turn on you. Is that what you want? Kazama ignored Sen's threats and instead shifted his cold gaze to Amagiri.
天霧、どういうつもりだ？なぜ連れてきた？
What is this, Amagiri? Why did you bring her here? Amagiri frowned.
千姫たっての願いによりお連れしました。鬼の一人として今日滑る千姫の命に従うのは当然のこと。
She asked. I can hardly refuse the commands of a demon of her stature. Then Sen had been worried for me and come to warn Kazama against harming me. She had asked Amagiri where he could be found, and Amagiri had brought her here. Finding me with Kazama has likely confirmed her suspicions.
今この場でこいつを奪うつもりはない。
I have no interest in taking her now. After all, if he'd wanted to kidnap me, he would have easily done so long before Sen arrived.
随分と聞き分けがいいけど、何か企んでる？
Really? I confess I'm rather surprised to find you so reasonable. Are you scheming something?
企みか。ないこともない。
Scheming? Ah, yes, I suppose you could say that. His eyes narrowed.
こいつの目の前で奴らを叩きのめし、奴らの目の前でこいつをさらう。
I want her to see me crush them utterly, and I want them to see me leave with her, my prize. His voice had almost a sing-song cadence to it.
すべての希望を絶たせ、絶望に染めさせるからこそ楽しいのだ。
What fun is all this if I can't use her to destroy hope and sow despair? Kazama's lips twisted into a cruel smile. Suddenly, I regretted letting myself think, even for a moment, that he might not be a bad person.
それができないのであれば、この遊びはしまいだ。
With the Shinsengumi gone, I can't do any of that. This game is over. Then, all of this had been for his amusement? Sen frowned.
あんた、性格悪いって言われない？
Has no one ever told you that you have a dreadful personality?
なんとでも言うがいい。
Only people of no consequence. Kazama gave her an arrogant sneer, and Sen sighed with exasperation.
まあ、そういうところはある意味鬼っぽいよ。
Well, you really are rather like a storybook demon, aren't you? That managed to get a reaction out of him.
じゃあさ、この子のことは諦めたってことでいいのかな？
May I assume then that you'd given up on her?
今はそう取ってもらって結構だ。
You may, for now. Kazama said no more, only stared down at Sen with a mixture of arrogance and amusement.
心変わりしないことを祈ってるね。さてと、これからどうするつもり？
Well, I pray that you do not change your mind. In any event, what will you do? Though her tone was light, her eyes still hard as steel.
薩摩への義理返しは終わった。これ以上人と関わるつもりはない。
I completed what obligations I had to the Satsuma. I have no intention of involving myself any further in human affairs. He did not hesitate in his answer. Perhaps he had made his mind up quite some time
だが
before.
この戦に関わった者として最後を見納めたい。江戸に行くつもりだ。
Still, as someone who has been part of this war, I would like to see how it'll end. I mean to go to Edo. Edo? If Kazama's predictions continued to prove correct, then the Shinsengumi were probably heading there as well. I wanted to find them again, and Edo was my hometown. His mention of it had awoken a sad nostalgia in me. With Kyoto under the control of the new Imperial Army, I certainly couldn't remain here, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wanted to go to Edo. I can ask Kazama or go alone. Let's find out. Here we go. Even top, odd bottom. Oh, got it 5. Go alone. I don't want to go with Kazama. I don't even trust him. I made my way from Edo to Kyoto on my own. There was no reason I should be able to return just as easily. Sen spoke up as I was thinking over what I wanted to do.
Edo? 行きたいんでしょ?
You want to go to Edo, right? She looked worried. Yeah. She fell silent at my confirmation, but the look of anxiety didn't leave her face. The whole country was like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Fighting could break out anywhere, at any time. Still, Kyoto and Osaka were already in the middle of a war. Simply by virtue of distance, Edo seemed safer. But there was still something that worried Sen.
こんな情勢で私は今日から離れられないし、本当に不本意なんだけど。
I can't leave Kyoto just now. I loathe asking for this for myriad reasons, but... She turned reluctantly to Kazama.
風間、この子の面倒見てあげられる?
Kazama, can you look after her? What? Shock made my voice unexpectedly loud and shrill, but Kazama seemed unperturbed by both my outburst and Sen's request.
勝手についてくるなら構わないがな。
She can follow me if she likes. I don't care. Kazama would certainly make a formidable bodyguard, but his motivations were, as they'd always been, somewhat suspect. Sen seemed to share my concern and turned to Amagiri.
Amagiri-sanもお願い.
Amagiri, would you be so kind as to come in here as well? He politely inclined his head.
千姫の仰せのままに。
As you wish, my lady. Sen smiled with relief, and I let out a silent sigh of the same. Thank you, Sen. Sen's eyes met mine, and her smile deepened as she gave me a tiny nod. I was sad to leave her, the only other woman I'd befriended in Kyoto, and there was no time for sad goodbyes. What about that one lady who was supposed to be your doppelganger? Whatever happened to her? Apparently, that must be like another storyline that I missed. I turned to Kazama and Amagiri. Thank you for helping me. I bowed deeply. When I came back up, I saw Kazama smiling.
人間がどれだけ愚かな生き物か、その目で見るといい。
On the contrary, I'd be happy to show you just how foolish humans are. I wanted to argue that point, but I kept my opinions to myself. After all, I knew that humans could make mistakes just like anyone else. Chapter 5. March 1867. I left Kyoto for Edo in hopes that I might be able to rejoin the Shinsengumi there. Kazama and Amagiri accompanied me, and consequently our journey was relatively free of trouble. I wasn't sure if it was Sen's influence, Amagiri's watchful eye, or something else entirely that got Kazama in line, but he did nothing suspicious and kept mostly to himself. After several days, we found ourselves in Edo. No sooner had we entered the city, however, than Amagiri asked to attend to some business of his own, alone. Kazama waved him away with no apparent concern. I would have preferred Amagiri to stay and not leave me alone with Kazama, but if there was something he felt bound to attend to, I could hardly stop him. Though Kazama made me nervous and uncomfortable, he seemed to be entirely at ease. He took us to the Satsuma Daimyo's residence to ask after the location of the Shinsengumi. Daimyo, a powerful samurai who ruled a fiefdom, or fiefdom, to pronounce it, and commanded vassals of his own. They served the shogun directly. I wasn't sure if he'd developed an interest in helping me, or was searching for the Shinsengumi for his own reasons. When he returned, his face said that whatever news he'd received hadn't been what he'd hoped for.
どうやらすれ違いのようだ。甲府とは無駄なことをする。
It looks as though we'd missed them. The Shinsengumi has left for Kofu. Oh, good it will do. Kofu? The Shinsengumi had left Osaka and come to Edo by sea, just as Kazama had predicted. They had also changed their name to the Koyu Regulatory Company, probably so they wouldn't get caught. Kyoyu Regulatory Company, the name given to the Shinsengumi by the shogunate when they were ordered to quell the uprisings in the Koshu, also known as Kyoyu region. They had been sent away from Edo to keep the peace in the area surrounding Kofu Castle. Kofu Castle, the castle that defended Edo along Tosando, the eastern mountain road.
Yoshinobu は寺にこもっている。なのに戦火を広げるのは賢いのかバカなのか。
Yoshinobu has shut himself up in a temple. Why go to war when your leader is running from it?
それに2000や3000の兵で本気で立ち向かうつもりなのか。
They're going to attack an opposing army with 2, maybe 3,000 men? Idiotic. Was he worried about the Shinsengumi? Well, I don't know if it was the smart choice, but I don't think they're really thinking about winning or losing. What drove the men of the Shinsengumi was something greater, something more profound than simply victory. I wasn't truly one of them, so perhaps I didn't fully understand fully, but they're doing what they believe is right, I'm sure of it. Kazama turned to me with sudden anger in his eyes, and I took an involuntary step back.
奴らは死に物狂いだ。死に場所を求めているようにしか見えない。
They're just desperate. All they're doing is looking for a place to die. Desperate? I had no respect for the suffering the men of the Shinsengumi had been through, or the strength of their beliefs. I didn't think there was a single man among them who was just looking for a battle to die in. I wanted to argue, to tell him how wrong he was, but instead I kept my mouth shut. Although I felt I was defending my friends, I had no more knowledge of their inner thoughts and desires than Kazama did. Arguing based on assumption and supposition was pointless. Besides, I already knew what I had to do next. Thank you for bringing me to Edo. I gave him a shallow bow. I couldn't allow myself to rely on Kazama anymore. I'm planning to go to Kofu Castle and join up with the Shinsengumi. My announcement didn't seem to surprise Kazama, and it was almost as if he'd known what I would do before I did it.
好きにしろ。奴らのところに戻ったら伝えておけ。気が向いたら俺がお前を奪いに行くとな。
Do what you want, but when you find them, be sure to tell them that I'll be coming to take you away, eventually. It was a strange, unsettling message, and it left Kazama with mixed feelings. I turned around to look back at where he'd been, but Kazama had disappeared into the ocean of people filling the streets. Kazama. Perhaps he was kinder than I had realized, although his motives were still a mystery. Oh my. I found my way back to my old house so I might gather a few things to prepare for my trip. I'm surprised it's still considered hers for how long she's been gone. Left unattended for years, the interior was covered in a thick layer of dust. This would take forever to clean up. If I was going to meet up with the Shinsengumi, I needed to depart for Kofu as soon as possible, which meant that I didn't have time to spare to clean my house. Besides, even if I did, there was no one to live in it anymore. I let out a small, sad sigh. Is there someone here? There? I jumped at the voice behind me, but strangely familiar. No. I spun around. Father! So all she had to do was go back home to find her dad? Wah wah wah. Hinata, you're back in Edo! His face broke into a broad smile. I'm so glad you're safe. I'm glad you're safe too. There had been times when I thought I'd never see my father again, but here he was. Against all odds, we'd survived the fires of war and made our way home to Edo. I could feel tears of happiness pricking at the corners of my eyes. Where were you? I went looking for you in Kyoto. I was working for the Satsuma and Chusu. Then the rumors had been true. But they finally let you go? Raising the Imperial battle standard had all but assured the victory of the Satsuma Choshu army. If that was the case, they wouldn't have any further use for my father. Or so I hoped. Actually, I'm still researching Furies for the Imperial Army. Furies? Furies were dangerous, unnatural things that should have never been created, but I was sure that my father was only doing research on them because he thought it could help someone. Kodo Yukimura. The protagonist's father had been researching the creation of Furies for the Satsuma and Chosu clans. What sort of research? If he had learned a way to turn Furies back into humans, then I would have to let the Shinsengumi know. I wasn't prepared for what he said next.
まだ江戸城が降伏していないじゃないか。私の仕事はね、羅刹隊を利用して江戸を火の海にすることなんだ。
Edo Castle still hasn't surrendered. My job is to use my army of Furies to set fire to Edo. What was he saying? Didn't make sense. Why would he want to set fire to Edo? He continued on, oblivious.
何もかも新政府軍のためなんだよ。
All of this is for the sake of the Imperial Army. Was he saying that he thought it was alright to burn down Edo so long as the Imperial Army said so? I couldn't understand why my father was doing what he was doing, but I did understand one thing. If I was using my girl voice for that. He wasn't being forced to help them. He was doing it willingly. Father? Whoa, what the hell? That was when I noticed the color of his eyes. They were gold. Why? There was no denying it now. My father had changed. As he reached out a hand to me, I felt fear grip my spine.
羅刹の力は素晴らしい。さあ、お前も一緒に羅刹となろう。そして
The power, the want of
私と一緒に来なさい。
The power of the water of life it given me is amazing. Join me, Hinata. Become a fury. Terror tightened my chest. No. I slapped his hand aside just as a familiar shadow appeared in the still open doorway. Kazama. He spared me a quick glance before turning those cold eyes on my father.
Kodo, どういうことだ?
What is this, Kodo? My father had frozen the moment he saw Kazama, and I saw him swallow before he responded.
Kazama-sama, なぜここに?
Lord Kazama, what brings you here? Kazama.
俺の質問に答えろ。羅刹の研究は中止したはずだ。なぜお前がそれを続けている?
Answer my questions. Research of Furies was to be halted. Why are you continuing?
それは。
Ah, you see. His voice faltered.
貴様、羅刹を餌に官軍に取り入ったな。
You used the Furies as a bargaining chip to secure your position in the Imperial Army, didn't you? Kazama's eyes were angry slits. My father's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Ah! Then suddenly he moved, shoving me towards Kazama and turning to run. I assumed Kazama would simply dodge my flying body and pursue my father, but one of his arms stopped my fall. What? Unfortunately, the time it took for Kazama to catch me was enough for my father to escape. When we turned to give chase, he was already gone. I'm sorry. I stepped back quickly, but Kazama didn't seem to even be paying attention to me. He was too busy glaring at the door my father had escaped through. He's gone. He didn't follow, only turned and walked towards the front door, scowling angrily. I followed. Then stopped short when I found Amagiri waiting for us.
お二人ともなぜここに?
Why are you here? He looked nearly as surprised to see us as I was to see him. Kazama frowned.
それは俺が聞くことだ。なぜお前がここにいる?
That's my question. What are you doing here? What is Amagiri doing here? And now that we found our father, he's given into his demon nature and drinking the water of life. Does that mean all we've been doing was for naught? And is Kazama a nicer person than we realized? God, so many questions, so little answers. But we'll find out next time on Hakuōki, Stories of the Shinsengumi. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoy, and I'll see you in the next episode.